everyone to another episode of A Breath of Fresh Marketing. I'm your host, Melissa Psihudakis, and today we are here with Savy Leiser. She is a passionate author, YouTuber, and small business owner owning the Furever Home Friends, LLC, which produces children's books and stuffed animals based on real rescue dogs. Her upcoming book, 90s Kids, will debut on June 8th, 2021. Welcome to the show. Savy, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about all of this.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Savy, as you mentioned. You did covered it all kind of in the overview, but yeah, I'm a small business owner and an author. And I started a YouTube channel about 2.5 years ago called Savy Writes Books. And on that channel, my focus is kind of books and business. So I do videos about all intersections of those things, whether that's book reviews or writing vlogs or writing tips or business reviews or talking about business ethics. But my favorite is when there's like a crossover, like when I can review business nonfiction books or when I can talk about writing books about business or talk about the business side of publishing and marketing and that kind of thing. So it's kind of encompasses all of that on YouTube. And that's definitely been kind of the most successful avenue I've had. But for the past 4 years, I've been running a small business called Furever Home Friends. We produce children's books, plushies, now toys and merch to go along with them, all based on rescue dogs, real rescue dogs and their stories. And I've also been writing some novels. So my 10th book is going to come out next week, June 8th, as you mentioned. And that book's called 90s Kids. It is a young adult Lgbt sci-fi romance contemporary. It's like a genre blend. I've been calling it lesbian Back to the Future. So if that's probably the most succinct way to describe it. But yeah, it's about two girls from different time periods that both get sent to the 80s and meet each other there on a 1989 adventure and fall in love.
Well, that sounds awesome. Very cool.
Thanks.
So where are you from originally?
So originally from Chicago area, still live in Chicago. But I moved out of Chicago for a little bit. Like I went to a high school in the Philadelphia suburbs and, but I've spent the majority of my life in Chicago. So I kind of forget that I ever didn't live here for a little bit. So then I'm always like, I'm from Chicago. The people are like, oh, which high school did you go to? And I'm like, oh, wait, that's right. I moved out of here for high school. But yeah, no, I'm from Chicago and I still live here.
Nice.
Yeah.
So is there a strong reading community there?
Yeah, definitely. I would say I've definitely before the pandemic hit, I was really into joining Chicago writing communities. I joined the Chicago chapter of SCBWI, which is Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And so I joined their chapter and I got really involved doing a lot of panel discussions and interviews with people there. I got really into doing a lot of Chicago street festivals and craft fairs with Furever Home Friends, selling the books and plushies to people passing by at events and doing, conventions and things like that, which I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back into now that we're getting vaccinated and all that. So that's good. But yeah, I've always found that there's a really strong community here for all of that. And I was really into the local communities around here for those kind of things before the pandemic. And then after the pandemic, during it really, I really started focusing on YouTube and growing my internet presence. So now I feel like I've got readers from all over, which is even cooler.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what originally got you interested in writing?
Oh, geez. What's funny is actually it was my dogs dogs got me interested in writing, and now I still write about dogs. So I was 4 years old when my family adopted our first rescue dog. When my mom adopted this dog we found from an animal shelter, who had just come out of an abusive situation. We adopted him, and I would just like to write stories about him. I just drew little pictures of him, and then one day it was Christmas time and he stole this candy cane off of a Christmas present and he started eating it. And then there was all this candy cane stuck to his fur. And I was 4 years old and found him guilty of eating the candy cane. And I found that so funny. So I started writing a story about that. And then I was like, whoa, writing is amazing. So I wrote this little book about that. And I stapled little papers together. And then I just didn't want to stop writing. So I continued to write about my dogs. I continued to write about rescue dogs. I continued to write about everything and just kind of never stopped.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So growing up, what kind of books did you naturally gravitate towards?
A few different kinds of books. I mean, I've always been kind of a a reader of many genres. I would say right now, when people ask me my favorite genre, it's books written by my friends, because I have so many author friends at this point where I'm getting involved in communities that I'm like, I just want to read everything all my friends are writing. Like, I don't even care what type of book it is. I just want to read what you're writing. But as a kid, I was really into, let me think, still a variety of things. I liked stuff that was funny the most. I loved, as like a little kid, I loved the Junie B. Jones series, and even into like my teenage years, they were still getting released. So I would continue to read them then, because those books were so funny and they were a huge inspiration to, my writing style. So I really liked those. And then as I got into like middle school, I really got into young adult novels. I became a fan of John Green around the time I was 14, I think, was when he first started putting out a lot of stuff. Was mid 2000s. I really got into his work then. But now I read a little bit of everything, although I'll say the genre I probably read the most right now is nonfiction, specifically like nonfiction about business, because I'm all about business stuff now. So I just love reading business books, but I'll read other stuff too, of course.
Okay. I like that. So can you tell us a bit about your new upcoming book, 90s Kids?
Yeah, absolutely. 90s Kids has been in the works for 3 years now, which is exciting. It was actually like it wasn't like my official master's thesis, but it was I got an MA and not an MFA, so I didn't have to officially submit a thesis, but this was kind of like the culmination of my master's degree project, where I spent, every quarter I would do a different class related to working on this novel. So it's been in the works for about 3 years, and it's the story of two kids born at opposite ends of the 90s. Got one girl born in 1990, one born in 1999. And they turned 16 in 2006 and 2015, respectively, and both go to take their driver's license tests at the DMV. There's been secretly a time portal this whole time that's been under construction there. So they both get in a time travel accident, get sent back to 1989, and they meet each other there. And now they're having an adventure in the 80s, trying to escape the DMV officials, having like a little romantic subplot going on, all this stuff. And it's full of like fun pop culture references, exploring the cultural differences between those time periods, and also exploring kind of the ways that acceptance and culture around the LGBT community has evolved, from 1989 to 2006 to 2015. And they're time periods that might seem close in terms of like the grand scheme of the universe, but in terms of the way that, these issues are talked about and accepted, there's been so much evolution and so much progress just in that short time. So it's interesting to examine those things. So it's a story about, time travel and teen relationships and things like that, but it's also kind of a story about the evolution of pop culture and acceptance and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I love that.
Thanks.
So what would you say your story means to you, and what do you hope it'll mean to others?
The story means a lot to me. I mean, I feel like I put like too much of myself in this story. That's the thing I'm telling like friends and family. I'm like, when you guys read the story, you're going to like laugh at so much stuff that you're going to be like, oh my God, that thing is exactly something Savvy says all the time or something like that. Yeah. But this story, I mean, in terms of like my personal goals as a writer, I always talk about writing as a way to help normalize the world that you want to see, like trying to, some people try to make the world better through politics or law or things like that, and trying to pass policies. That's not my area of expertise. I'm a writer, so I try to make the world better through storytelling and trying to help normalize a world that I think would be good for people to see overall. So that's why I put a lot of focus on writing books with, female protagonists who have a lot of agency and strong women and those kind of things. But in this book specifically, I wanted to have some representation of, LGBT identities, but sometimes ones that get a little bit glossed over. You don't see a lot of books that delve into like a bisexual character. You do more so now. When I started writing it 3 years ago, there weren't as many. But now it seems like people are getting more invested in that, which I really appreciate. So the concept of like bisexual visibility and delving into not just like what having a same-sex relationship means, but like what the intricacies are of like, what does it mean to be bisexual versus like homosexual, and how are those identities and experiences different? How are there similarities and things like that? The other characters kind of coded as asexual somewhat, but also, somewhat lesbian as well. So it's like what that intersection is kind of too, and how, the like people didn't used to almost recognize asexuality, but now it's kind of becoming more normalized. So it's like kind of looking at those types of visibility, and that's really important to me, that people, are aware of all these different the different sects, I guess, of the LGBT community. It's not just one thing. And I think sometimes people see it as like, just seeing like, oh, here's a same-sex marriage and now everything's okay. But I think that there's a lot more to it than that. So that's a really important thing that I wanted to stress with this book. And I guess another big thing is just the idea that the world, like sometimes it feels like there's a bleak outlook on everything going on in life, but I'm a person who believes that the world does tend to get better as time moves forward. And it's not always true at all times. Like we just had a global pandemic, but I think on the whole, it's kind of a positive outlook of what's to come. It's kind of the opposite of like a lot of the YA dystopian we see and stuff. It's like this future is better. The world gets better as time goes on. And it was kind of inspired by like Star Trek and how Star Trek sees like a positive outlook of the future. And so this book's kind of going like, okay, a lot of times we idolize the past. A lot of times we have an ideal view of the nostalgia of the pop culture of time periods in the past, but things have improved since then, and the world is going to keep improving as we go forward. So that's definitely like a positive outlook. Everything gets better as time goes on, but the DMV always sucks. That's basically what this book is.
The DMV, it's freaking awful. Mm-hmm. One time I spent 4.5 hours there. And they're working on my phone, and I was like the last person. It was like number 1 million,
Yeah, you spent like all day there. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I eventually, I just didn't get my license because I live in the city. So after I spent like 3 hours at the DMV on 3 different days, I'm like, whatever, I'm done.
Yeah, no, it's the worst. It's really horrible. So apparently this will be your 10th book, which is very impressive. So congrats on that.
Thanks.
And it's a pretty major milestone, really. Can you tell us about your journey to get there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went into the book publishing world completely impulsively, which, I mean, having been someone who's been a writer my entire life, you would think that I would have probably planned for it a little better, but I didn't. I've always been kind of a impulsive person when it comes to following big ideas or goals or things like that. I have an idea for something and I'm like, I'm going to do it right now. And sometimes that turns out well, sometimes it turns out terrible, but something always results from it. You always create something. So that's good. So the first book I put out back in 2016 is Beauty King. And that book is, I mean, I'm not going to say it's bad because it's still for sale. And I think it's kind of funny. And I think that there's a lot of fun to be had in it, but I've definitely improved a lot since then. And that book I put out, right out of college. I wrote it and I was like, I want to find out about how the book publishing world works. So I'm just going to upload this onto Amazon and see what happens. So I just uploaded it onto Amazon. It's sold the worst out of all 10 of my books because I did no marketing on it. I had no idea what the publication process was like. I prepared not at all. I just hit the publish button and was like, let's see what happens. What happened was it sold the worst out of all of my books, which I'm okay with because then there was nowhere to go but up. I know that the publishing world often tries to place this emphasis on debut novels, but for me, my 10th book is the big one right now. So it's like, no, we can all keep improving as time goes on. At least that's how I see it. So I put that one out. And then once that came out, I suddenly understood how hard it was to sell books in this world and how many books are on Amazon and how much of a rich and vibrant independent author community there was. So I started learning about self-publishing and about traditional publishing. I started learning about the process of querying agents and looking for publishers, and also the process of self-publishing and how to do that in a professional way and how to get, readers and reviews. And I started learning about all of those communities. And along with that journey, I started a YouTube channel, started talking about that journey on there. I released then I released Furever Home Friends in 2017. And that series was off to a much better start. It's still kind of my biggest thing because that I funded on Kickstarter. So I took pre-orders on Kickstarter for that. And I, set up if you pledge a certain amount, that counts as a pre-order for this book or pre-order for this plushie or something like that. So I set up that Kickstarter in 2017, raised about $7,200 on Kickstarter, and launched that out into the world. And then I started doing book signings with that, started taking it to pet stores. I started trying to look outside the box with, I never wanted to be reliant on Amazon. And I feel like that's a thing that plagues a lot of authors, is that, Amazon is the biggest book retailer. Small bookstores are shutting down all the time. And even other websites, it's hard. So, but you don't want to be reliant on it at the same time, because it's like Amazon is a big company and you don't own it. Jeff Bezos owns it and you can't control what he does. So I didn't want to be reliant on that. So I started trying to think outside the box, do as many festivals as I could, book signings at pet stores, collaborations with pet brands and things like that, and trying to take things from a bunch of different angles. That worked pretty well for that. And then I released my next 2 novels shortly after that, which were Sculpt Yourself and One Final Vinyl. And then in September of 2020, I did my most recent self-published project, which was Savvy Business Owner, my book about starting and running a business, where I kind of told the story of starting Furever Home Friends, talked about everything I learned about business along the way, what I know, what I still want to learn. And I just kind of tried to delve into the specifics of each thing, because I've been reading so many business books, and I felt like there was always a little bit of a disconnect where it seemed like, people who write business books seem to usually be people who are so successful in business or who have been in business for so long, they almost forget what the average person doesn't know. So I wanted to try to really focus on those things that I was like, when I'd read business books, like, oh, but how'd you do this? I don't know how this happened. I tried to really detail all of those things. So that was that book that I put out. And then for 90s Kids, I decided I wanted to try working with a publisher. I wanted to do something a little different. This wasn't going to be my own business. I wanted to work with someone else on this one. And I found the company Muse Media Publishing, because actually I had been working for their Muse Media started as a publisher of magazines like 13 years ago. So I had been writing for their magazines. That was a job I got out of college. And then when I heard that they wanted to venture into book publishing as well, I was like, I'm going to pitch you my book right now, because I've liked writing for your magazines, and the book publishing leg of it was kind of like for books with, performing arts or marching band or music type of angles. And I was like, one of the main characters of this book's in the marching band. There's a whole lot of music. There's some 80s girl rock band stuff. It's going to be fun. So I pitched this book and I got the publication contract, and it's been really fun. And I've been really excited to kind of work with a small press, because everyone who watches my YouTube channel or who interacts with me on social media knows that I'm really passionate about women in business and woman-owned small businesses. I'm not really into the big corporate scene. I didn't really want to pitch to an agent and try to get a big 5 publisher. I wanted to work with a small business, preferably owned by a woman, and that's exactly what I did. So I'm really excited about this process.
It's very cool. It's very exciting. Publishing a book at any point is always super exciting, but you got like 10. That's
thanks.
Crazy. So this is your first time traditionally publishing. Is that right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So your previous books, you did the self-publishing. Can you explain the difference between the two and your feelings on both?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So for a background, like traditional publishing, it's called that because it's been, I guess, the traditional model for the past, I don't know, few decades at least. Not ever, I wouldn't say, because, if you go back to like the times of like Virginia Woolf and Frankenstein and times like that, like those authors were self-publishing because there wasn't a publishing corporate structure put in place yet. But once there was, that became kind of the go-to model, which is that, an author writes a book and that is their role. They're the writer, that's their role. And they pitch that book to either a literary agent, and if the agent signs them, then the agent pitches the book to the publishing company. Then the publishing company, they get the book printed, they design the cover, they distribute it to bookstores, they distribute it to Amazon and online retailers and all of that. Then the author gets a cut of the profit, the agent gets a cut of the profit, the publisher gets a cut of the profit, the store gets a cut, everyone gets a cut. Self-publishing is kind of, you write the book and then you are in control of everything that happens. So you can design the cover, you can choose the printer, you can choose who you distribute it to. Along with that, it's more entrepreneurial. So there is the risk as well with, you are then responsible for paying for it because you don't have a publisher who's paying for it for you. So but then the positive side of that is that you keep all the profit. So once you start selling it, there's no publisher or agent taking that profit. You pay, I guess, for the printing. And if you're selling it, I guess you're selling it yourself, like just to someone directly, no retailer takes a profit. But if you're selling it through a store, if you're selling it through an online retailer, they'll take a little cut as well. But other than that, like you keep a much higher amount of money. So you have to put in money up front usually, or not. I mean, I designed my own cover for Savvy Business Owner. I paid basically nothing to publish that. So it really depends on the process. But if you want to pay for professional cover design, formatting services, if you want to get a run of them printed beforehand, you would pay for those. Or if you want to do like print on demand, you don't have to pay for printing up front, but you still would have to pay the printing cost when each book prints, but you get to keep the full royalty. So that's good. So those are the main differences, I would say. When I looked at like Furever Home Friends, there wasn't really a question of like if I wanted to pitch that to a publisher because I wanted to own the company that published it. So it's kind of like, it's self-published in the sense that I own the publisher of the books, but it's also published through my company. So, but I wanted to create consistent branding of like, I'm creating these books as a product the same way I'm creating these stuffed animals as a product. So I wanted to treat it that way, as opposed to treating the book as like an entirely separate production process than everything else. So that's why I didn't pitch to a publisher for that. But yeah, those are the key differences. And then even within traditional and self-publishing, even within those broad categories, there are subsets of each thing. Like for example, in traditional publishing, a lot of people think of you get signed by an agent, the agent pitches it then to Penguin Random House or HarperCollins or Simon & Schuster, and then that kind of thing. But those are, big presses. I don't have an agent, mainly because I've worked with artists and with other people who have agents, and it just gets to be really complicated when I'm trying to run my own company. Sure. So I didn't pitch to an agent. Instead, I pitched to a small press because a lot of smaller presses don't require that you go through an agent because they're a smaller operation. So that's kind of what I did for that, which is yet another kind of difference between those experiences.
Nice. So what inspired you to start your YouTube channel?
A lot of things. I've always been someone who likes creating videos. I was originally a film major in college, and I got like a certificate in creative writing for media before I went to grad school to study writing and publishing. And I was really into screenwriting and TV writing and things like that. And in college, I was always directing student films. So I really like making little videos and movies and things like that. And when I found that there was a community online for people who make videos about books, who make videos about writing, it just seemed kind of like a perfect way to put those skills together in a unique way to reach the exact audience of what I'm looking for. So I got really into making videos about writing blogs, making book review videos. And then as I got more into running my business, I started getting more into doing business related videos and critiquing companies that are running unethically versus, critiquing books about business and things like that. So I just got really into it. And then it also helped with like when we were in the pandemic, I'm such an extrovert. And as a writer, I feel like that can be kind of rare. Like a lot of people think of writers and readers as very like quiet and introverted people, but I cannot do that. I need to be talking to other people all the time. Otherwise I just fall asleep. So I was like, I need to be talking to other people. I need to be connecting with other writers all the time. And I couldn't be going to events. I couldn't be pitching to people at festivals and things like that. So I started this YouTube channel, started meeting other people in the comment sections, got to know a lot of other people, which I also then created a Facebook group for business owners to support each other and things like that. So for me, it's like, I need that constant human interaction. And I love talking to the camera. I love editing the videos. Just the whole process is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I like people and talking, and I mean, if you're not engaging, it's like you fall asleep because it's like you lose interest and then you get
exactly bored. And that's why it makes sense you're running a podcast. Yeah.
exactly. So your catchphrase, "What's up, small business supporters?" It's evident that you're a strong supporter of small businesses as well
Yeah.
as an owner yourself, of course. So can you tell us about the importance of small businesses?
Sure. I mean, I think that small businesses, like there needs to be more freedom for people to enter creative fields or to enter, fields of being able to innovate and create new things. And I think that a lot of big businesses, they try to take over, or sometimes it's even hard to divorce yourself fully from big businesses. For example, like a lot of small businesses, they want to sell through Amazon, sell through Etsy, sell through bigger companies, which, sometimes it's hard to get away from that. But I think it's important that we support other people's endeavors as they're trying to break into this really difficult field to break into. There seems like there's so many barriers to entry when the playing field has just never been level in terms of what big businesses are able to produce in high quantities at low costs and things like that. And I've always just felt like small businesses have a connection with the person that you're buying from, whether they handmade the item themselves or whether it's something that there's generally some level of passion behind it. Passion for something other than just business. There's generally a passion for art or hand making things or cooking, or there's generally a passion for the creation of whatever it is you're selling itself in addition to for managing a business. So I think that that's really cool as well. I wish that there were more, that it were easier for people to start small businesses. And that's, why, like within the US, I don't know if I need to go on a political rant or something like that, but that's why I've always been like, I've been a supporter of like universal basic income and things like that, and universal healthcare. I think there's a lot of barriers in place, even legally, that make it really hard for people to get a small business off the ground. So
Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to, help support other people. And I also think that it's a great way for small business owners to collaborate with each other because, it's hard when you first start creating a product and you go pitch it to Target or Walmart. It's going to be hard for them to stock it when they're, working with tons of companies all the time versus if you want to sell it at your local farmer's market, you can kind of strike a mutually beneficial deal. There's a lot of ways for small business owners to kind of help each other grow through mutually beneficial arrangements and things like that. So
Right.
I think it's just great to work together rather than trying to compete with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. So according to your website, you have an incurable case of dog fever, right?
Yes, I do.
So your love of dogs likely translated into your small business, the Furever Home Friends, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So can you tell us about the Furever Home Friends and its purpose?
Yeah, so Forever Home Friends, as an overview, it's my company. We produce children's books, picture books, plushies, merch, toys, all based on real rescue dogs. And the original inspiration for it came when my family, when I was in middle school, we adopted a black lab. And her name was Allie, and she was always like wanting all the attention. She was very cute about it. And we adopted her from the shelter. And my mom would always make this joke with me, like, Savvy, I need you to write a book about Allie, who's the little diva dog. She wants to be the little princess all the time. You need to write a book about the dog princess and things like that. And we would talk about that. And so then when I finished college, I was like, yeah, I really should write this. So when I finished college, I started writing a couple drafts of a book where I kind of took inspiration from like the Junie B. Jones style of writing, where it's like, a kid being really sassy and really goofy and trying to sound mature and things like that. I was like, I'll do that with a puppy voice. That could be kind of fun. So I went through a few drafts of that and I worked on writing it, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. I thought it was funny. And then I adopted Chewy, my dog, in 2016, and noticed, when we adopted him, we learned that he'd gone through a lot of stuff and that he was dealing with anxiety and that he was dealing with some mental health issues due to some things he had dealt with in his past. And we were actually his third home. And right around this time, I had just myself been diagnosed with OCD and had just started medication for it. And it got me thinking about how a lot of dogs and people parallel similar types of issues that we go through, and that there are these big important topics in the world that we want to introduce kids to, but that are hard we don't want it to be too scary. We don't want it to be too complicated. We want it to be something that they can connect with and empathize with and understand. And I was like, well, this is perfect. I could maybe write a story about Chewie struggling to overcome some things from his past and gain self-confidence and gain the ability to stand up for himself and things like that. I could take the same thing with the Princess Allie book and make a book about, what lessons is she learning about not being materialistic, about how family is important and we need to share with other people and things like that. So I ended up developing sets of discussion questions for each book, and each book kind of has a set of discussion questions in the back. So a lot of teachers use them with students and things like that. So I did that. And then for the plushie component, I kind of was taking inspiration from the American Girl doll company and from Build-A-Bear. American Girl was always a big influence on my life when I was a kid. I've always been a toy lover. I know that sometimes kids go through a phase where they stop liking toys. I don't understand that. I never had that. I'm 28 and I've never stopped liking toys. I collect toys. I play with them. I make toys. I do everything. So I was really into this idea of, well, if you've got this story about a dog and you can hold that dog and you can hug them and you can snuggle with them, especially if you're a kid who loves dogs, but your family isn't ready to have one or is not able to have one or something, but you could still feel like you connect with this character and they're your dog. You can get a little adoption certificate for them. You can get little accessories and toys for them and stuff like that. I thought that would be really cute. And then added in the component of, since these are real rescue dogs, donating 10% of profits to animal shelters. So I started with those two books that I launched, and then I slowly started adding other characters to the series by interviewing shelters that I worked with to find out interesting stories about dogs that had been there. I recently did this book called The Love of Senior Dogs, where I ran a contest and had people enter stories about their elderly dogs. Because I know we get a lot of books about puppies and young dogs, but a lot of times we need to remember old dogs, they need love too. And old dogs are fantastic. And sometimes people pass them over for adoption, but they have a lot of love to give in this world. So I chose 11 winners of the contest, and I wrote a poem about each of their dogs and did a little art piece to go with each one. And then I put out that book about the senior dogs. In 2020, I also started introducing elements of toys that went with the plushies as well, like little accessories, like a little princess crown for the Allie plushie, a little camera for the Chewie plushie, because in his book he's smiling for the camera. The little Wrigley plushie, she loves music, so I made her some headphones. So I started learning 3D modeling, and I've been printing them on a 3D printer and painting them and assembling those toys and things like that. So it's been a really fun journey of creating toys and creating books, but also trying to, it's representing dogs, but it's also representing people and showing how animals and humans go through those same struggles, using that as a vehicle to convey these bigger topics to kids.
Absolutely. Very cool. So in your YouTube videos, you actually talk a lot about LGBT topics in literature, such as representation and erasure, along with your own LGBT identity. What are your thoughts on the importance of good LGBT representation in literature?
It's incredibly important. And I think it's great that we're seeing a lot more of it just in the past decade or so. When I was a teenager growing up, I didn't see a whole lot of LGBT representation in books. I saw a few books, I had a couple books that were about gay teenage boys. And then I saw a few, one or two lesbian books I had, I think, but there was I had a ton of books. There was almost none. And this is another place where I will credit the independent author movement with, I think, really helping with this, because, a lot of big companies, they like to go with what they know is going to sell to the widest amount of people.
Right.
When you're a smaller author or working with a smaller press, you can really zero in on that target audience and really try to focus on that group. So it's why, we started seeing a lot more books that featured a variety of different types of relationships, a variety of different types of identities. And I just I think that is a lot of people who grew up, I'm making myself sound old. I'm 28. I'm not that old, but
No.
A lot of people who were a teenager 10, 15 years ago, like I was, you didn't see any bisexual representation. You absolutely saw no like asexual representation, very little trans representation. If there were LGBT books, they were mainly like there was like one same-sex relationship in it, and that was it. And it was mostly about suffering and how they suffered as a result. So it's definitely, I think it's while those books are good to have and they're important to have, but I think it's great that we're growing into having more, because we need to start showing the variety of experiences that people go through. And I know when I was growing up, a lot of people didn't realize that, being bisexual or asexual or non-binary or things like that were even an option. So you just like lived in a perpetual state of confusion, because you're like, well, I don't feel like I'm gay. I don't feel like I'm straight. I don't feel like whatever. And you're like confused the whole time because there's no information out there to go by. So I think it's really important to have, the media around us. That's what influences how we see the world and how we interact with fiction and with reality. So it feels important to have books and, movies and TV and everything that shows a variety of different experiences. So you can be like, oh yeah, this does make sense. This is a perfectly normal thing to experience. And I feel like it helps people understand themselves and their friends and their life a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so true. I mean, when I think about it, if you hone in as a writer on a specific niche where there's not enough content in that niche, I mean, you can do really well.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's very interesting. That's a very good point. So offering all sorts of writing advice, supportive reviews, and guidance, you're becoming a bit of a role model towards aspiring authors. How do you feel about that?
I don't know. I'm excited that people I'm just really happy that people like my work. I'm like excited that people want to read my books and watch my videos. And it's still new to me. So it's really exciting because I've been putting books out for a couple of years now, but only in the past year or two have I really gained, much traction. And, Furever Home Friends had been doing all right, in the past couple of years in 2017, 2018, things like that. But this is still a very new process. I'm excited. And I'm also like, I don't want to mess anything up. I never want to give someone the wrong advice. I never want to lead anyone down the wrong path. And I think that's one reason why when I critique a lot of business gurus and stuff, I try to say, okay, this person did this thing that I really don't like. And I could see how I could fall into that trap if I'm not careful. So it's important, I think, to keep reflecting on what you're doing and why you're doing it. And but no, I'm excited. I'm super excited, but I'm also constantly like, oh no, what if my writing advice doesn't work for someone? Or what if I say something and then it ends up being wrong a year later? Or I don't know. I don't want to mess up. But at the same time, I'm really grateful that there is an audience that's willing to listen to me in the first place. I think that's amazing. So I think it's like they say, like Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So now that I suddenly have people listening to me, I'm like, oh, I need to really make sure I'm giving people good information, and it makes you a little more nervous, but I'm still doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's fun, a fun journey and a good learning experience too. So who were some of your own role models when you were starting out?
Some of my own role models. Well, I would say, I have my author role models. I could talk about my favorite authors and things like that. I will say I like people who existed in the books and business intersection. So I had a couple role models for that. One, Hank Green. I love his YouTube channel. I love his writing. I love how he's kind of a business owner who also writes books and kind of keeps that balance and kind of shows me that, yes, that is something that you can do and be successful with. I'm also, Pleasant Rowland, the founder of the American Girl Company, has always been a role model to me. That's my first chapter of my book, Savvy Business Owners, me talking about how when I was a little kid, I wrote her a fan letter being like, why isn't American Girl publicly traded? I want to buy stock. I don't know why I said that. Like, I mean, I was like, I had like a weird interest in the stock market as a kid, which I don't as an adult. I wish it translated to a strong understanding of finance as an adult, but it didn't. I just like had a weird interest in it as a kid. But I was very into like not just buying the dolls, but like into like the business of it and like looking at like, oh man, how are you developing new products? How are you doing this? Like, how are you publishing these books and making these toys to go with them? And who's making these decisions? And I just got like really into it. So she's always been a really big role model for me as well. And I mean, the company was bought out by Mattel in 1998. So it's not a small business anymore, but I'm still really like following what she was able to do and learning about the history behind that company and things like that. So those would definitely be some role models. I love looking at, business owners who are successful in those specific fields. And I definitely tend to gravitate towards people who are in the book sphere, but who are business owners as well as writers.
Yeah, no, that's pretty awesome. So one of the most persisting problems amongst writers is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome?
I wish I suffered from imposter syndrome because I feel like maybe this is what imposter syndrome is. Maybe this is imposter syndrome is. I sometimes worry, like, because I'm very confident and very impulsive, and I'm very just excited to move into a project, and I'm like, everyone's gonna love this. It's gonna be great. And then sometimes I worry, like, is the fact that I think this a sign that I need to be reflecting more on what I'm doing or stepping back a little bit? Is this a sign that I have no idea what I'm doing? I don't know. Maybe that's when the imposter syndrome comes in. But overall, I would say it's not a big problem for me, just because I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm like a puppy. I just see something shiny and exciting and I'm like, oh yes, I want to do this thing. And I just do it. So yeah. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe it'll get me into trouble one day. I don't know. But for now, I don't really take insecurities that seriously. And I know that seems like an easy thing to say, because I understand that, like, I've dealt with a lot of mental health issues. So I understand how a lot of those things can hold people back very easily. So I guess I'm fortunate that I don't have to deal with imposter syndrome much.
It sounds more like you're describing impulsive syndrome.
Impulsive syndrome. Maybe that's my problem, is that, yeah, I'm just like, I see new ideas and I start doing them. And next thing I know, I'm like working 90 hours a week. And I'm like, how did this happen? And I'm like, oh, because I started a million new projects, but I don't want to stop any of them. They're all great.
I can totally relate. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
So I'm the same, when it comes to, oh, what's this shiny new idea? What's this shiny new object? And then just, you pick up the ball and you run with it. And then 90 hours a week, same thing, just grinding and trying to make it come to life. So.
That's a weird conflict I find myself in a lot. Is a lot of my videos and a lot of what I do is critical of hustle culture and critical of this idea of you have to monetize everything and work around the clock. But in my personal life, I absolutely do that. So I'm trying to say, like, I'm not the perfect role model for everybody. My life is what I want it to be. But like, I hate the idea. I guess what I hate is the idea that it's pushed that everybody should think this way or that everybody should want to work all the time. That's not true. I want to work all the time. But not everybody should or has to. Like, everybody should pursue what their goals are, and everyone's goals and purpose is different.
That's right. So it's important to surround ourselves with a strong support network, as you know. Mm-hmm. Who would you say are your biggest supporters today?
My mom is probably my biggest supporter of all. And I mean, she's basically started Furever Home Friends with me. She's been the stuffed animal designer from the beginning. That's cool. She's really talented at sewing. So I had her start designing stuffed animals, and we handmade them in 2017. We stopped pretty quickly because that was really unsustainable. We get them produced now, but she does the initial prototypes. So, but she's also, my mom was an event planner for a majority of her career. So she always, goes with me to events, and we set up elaborate table displays and things like that. We haven't in a while because of the pandemic, but back when we did that, it was really great. So my mom's always been incredibly supportive of this business and helping me out all the time. Other than that, I mean, my husband, Tyler, he's really been supportive the whole time, because I work a lot, as you know, and like there's times when I'm like, all right, I know your work day is done, but we're gonna eat dinner and I'm gonna go back to it. And he's never once made me feel guilty or never been like, Savvy, you're never around. Even when I was like in grad school, I had a period where I was in grad school. I had just started Furever Home Friends. I was working multiple jobs on top of it because it wasn't profitable yet. So all in all, it was like I would get up really early. I would get back home at 10, 11 p.m. and the whole day in there was work. And I was never around for anything. So I felt pretty bad about that, but he was always supportive through all of it. He always took care of our dog and stuff. So that was good. So he's been a really supportive person too. And then on top of that, I'm just really grateful in the past year and a half how many strong online friendships I've made. I have a lot of friends that I've made collaborative videos with, that we've always been able to work on creative projects together and promote each other's work and support each other. I recently started a podcast with one of my writer friends named RK Gold. He and I started a podcast called Your Morning Guru, where we live the lives of various business gurus and read their books and review them and see if we can learn anything or if they're just all nonsense. So we've been trying to do that. And he and I have been writing a book together. So he and I have been like a support network for each other. So there's friendship there. My publisher, Christine, who is publishing 90s Kids, she's been supportive of me since I started writing for her magazine a few years ago. And then when I pitched a book to her, and she was all the way, on board and has believed in my writing since for the past 5-6 years now. So she's been an incredible supporter of mine. I feel bad like I'm going to forget someone, but there's like, that's my whole like author's note in the book is I'm like, people always ask me like, how do you handle the fact that you need to be around other people all the time, but writing is such a solitary activity? And I'm like, it's not, and it shouldn't be. For me, it is something where I work with other people all the time, and having people you can rely on and a support network is necessary, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good when you have that support group because it really does kind of help when you need it most.
Absolutely.
So what overall message would you like to share with anyone listening who's interested in reading or writing young adult, new adult, or LGBT fiction?
Writing or reading, I guess those would be kind of different. But if you're interested in writing it, I'd say like the world needs your voice. If you want to, like, I think that they're, like I was saying earlier, we're just in need of so many more perspectives. And I'm a believer that there can never be too many stories. There is no limit on the number of stories that can exist in the world. And people who like to read, they really like to read. You get people on Kindle downloading like 20 romance novels a month. So like, writing should never be a competition. It's not like, oh, this person published a book, therefore this person can't, especially with the internet and the ability to sell things infinitely. Like, write what you want to write. Other people will write what they want to write. Support each other. Don't compete against each other. I mean, give each other a negative review if you really didn't like the book, because it's also important to be honest. But don't ever feel like just because somebody wrote something that you can't write that too, or don't ever worry that there's going to be a maxed out number of books or something. I see people sometimes arguing about like, oh, this book got published, but this book should have been published. Like, we can have an infinite number of books. Doesn't matter. All the books. Publish every book.
Right. I did my first self-published book, and it's on Amazon, and it's a book about a cat.
That's awesome. Oh my God, I need to look it up. What's it called?
Penny the Perfect Cat.
Penny the Perfect Cat. That's adorable. I'm going to look that up. That sounds great.
And it's actually based on my daughter who just came in here. Hey, hi.
Oh, hello.
Hey, hi. So I spelled perfect, P-U-R-R.
That's so cute. I love it.
And where can we find you on social media?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest place to find me is on YouTube on my channel, Savy Writes Books. Savy is spelled with 1 V. But even if you search it with 2 Vs, which a lot of people do, it'll still come up because I tagged all my videos with my name spelled wrong just because I saw people were searching for it. That's awesome. So you can find me either way. On my website is fureverhomefriends.com, Furever spelled F-U-R like dog fur, so fureverhomefriends.com. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Savy Leiser. So just my name. And you can check out 90s Kids is up on Goodreads, so you can add it to your Goodreads to read list. You could pre-order it on Amazon and all of that. Yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. And I wish you much success with Furever Home Friends. Yeah, I'm excited to hear more and see your book when it comes out.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I had a great time talking with you.
Likewise. All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of A Breath Fresh Marketing, and be well.